We would like to thank your sponsor, Valley First, a division of First West Credit Union and a member-owned financial cooperative serving the Okanagan, Similkameen, and Thompson regions. They offer a wide range of banking and investment services for individuals and families. Valley First also has a talented business and commercial team to provide the expertise, products, and services local businesses need to grow and thrive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Matters, presented by Valley First, a division of First West Credit Union. My name is Rob Capello, and today we welcome Aaron Bowyer back to Business Matter. I think this is your second time on, Aaron, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, thanks for having me back, bro.
No problem. So Aaron's the branch manager at Valley First West Kelowna branch. So I think most people have heard now that we've had wildfires sweeping through the Okanagan, and they're still going. And many maybe are thinking about how to be prepared for these events. So today we're going to explore, steps that maybe viewers can take to be prepared. So there's a few things we can talk about for sure on that front. But before we do, maybe Aaron, maybe you can tell us a little about, your role at Valley First, what, as a branch manager in West Kelowna, what your day-to-day looks like. And I'm sure every day is different, but what sort of your day-to-day role looks like at Valley First?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the branch manager of the West Kelowna branch of Valley First, so our Vintage Hills branch. So I lead a team of advisors, so our member advisors as well as our financial advisors here. And we offer financial services. Obviously, we are a credit union, so very ingrained in our community. So not only kind of working with our members on a daily basis, but also like you had mentioned, Rob, things that impact our community as well, looking to support those who have been impacted there.
Yeah, and can you remind us, how did you get into the industry? I'm always curious. I know we've had this discussion. I was trying to reach back to my notes of what got you into the banking industry?
Yeah, so I'm actually a third generation credit union employee, but I actually started my career at one of the Big Five in Canada. So yeah, something where, especially kind of going through my university degree, I was actually already working for that bank. And I think really kind of the impact that we can have in our members' lives, just seeing kind of through those different kind of steps along the way, I think has, I would say, been kind of my passion throughout, and that kind of has really led to kind of my career advancement and the eventual joining of a credit union, because I really think it's more aligned with my values.
Right. And how long have you been branch manager?
So I've been the branch manager here in West Kelowna for just over 2.5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, so originally from the Okanagan, I was out on the coast for about 6 years, but it was time to come home.
Yeah, love it. So we want to talk about, the situation that many are going through right now, and it's, for some it's devastating, lost their homes, for sure. And I'm curious, have you ever been through yourself? I was kind of thinking back, people in this area, 2003 and so forth. But have you ever been through this yourself before? Have you been affected by it before?
So I haven't personally, but actually the neighborhood that I grew up in, I actually lived in Toronto in 2003.
Right.
But the neighborhood I grew up in, Crawford Estates, was heavily impacted by the 2003 fires. And actually, it's very interesting that I actually moved back to Crawford Estates when I kind of eventually came back to Kelowna, and the house we lived in actually was unfortunately a total loss in that fire. So,
wow.
Yes, indirectly have been affected. Obviously, lots of family and friends in that area as well that were impacted back in 2003.
Interesting. And I'm curious if you're in a branch manager role, not that you ever can be prepared for situations like this I'm thinking from your role is, do you guys go through training for stuff like this? Do you have to, be prepared for disasters and things like this from a branch manager point of view? Do you actually go through that type of training?
You know what, I would say not necessarily directly related to wildfires, but I would say we've definitely had to kind of be more cognizant of change management kind of type training, especially since for example, years of kind of working through COVID and then kind of our
Right.
response to that. So I think that that has absolutely been something that has been more aligned to kind of the training, especially from a management leadership standpoint.
Interesting. And being in West Kelowna, you've firsthand seen the devastation and hardship that this wildfires caused this time. And how have these recent wildfires affected like you personally or your branch team?
Yeah, so I wanted to start with, first and foremost, I wanted to thank our firefighters and our frontline workers, because I have no doubt that we would have been impacted more severely if it wasn't for the tireless work that they have been doing. We have just over half our branch team that was directly impacted by the wildfires, so either on evacuation alert or on evacuation order. So definitely something that has impacted our branch team here. For myself personally, I actually wasn't on evacuation alert, so we were very thankful there. But for myself and my wife, and obviously this is kind of very minor in the grand scheme of things, we have a little 6-month-old at home, so obviously the air quality and things like that were obviously a concern for us. So kind of working through those things on a personal front as well.
And I'm sure that you've probably had, outside of your team, many members that have been affected as well from the wildfire. So what have you been hearing from your members, and what are those conversations like? Because they can't be easy, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously a very traumatic time for our community. And I really kind of working with those members individually, especially those who have lost their homes or lost their businesses, to show that we're here to kind of reassure them, be able to provide support, and kind of how we will fit in kind of that process. Because obviously it's an extremely difficult time, kind of having someone there to kind of outline what those next steps might look like is really kind of that part that we play in kind of getting them back on track.
So when something like this does happen, then, because we've been through, like you said, COVID, we've had in our community, more Kelowna floods and wildfires. So when something like this happens, what's available to them, either financially or otherwise? Like, what options are available to members?
And so we have a program that actually supports members directly, especially those who have been impacted by the wildfire devastation. It's called our Back on Track program. So this is actually something that is managed directly through our special accounts team. So it allows individuals who have been impacted by the wildfires to have that direct support, that they'll be able to have access to that Back on Track program without completing a full application, without having to complete kind of the budget that is normally required there. And the special account team will work directly with those individuals to kind of provide a customized option, especially when individuals are waiting for, say, that response from their insurer and what that will eventually look like, provides them some options on kind of what they can do in the interim there. Just to give an example, we had a member who was able to kind of work with the special accounts team and actually was able to have interest-only payments while they kind of await for that response from their insurer there.
Interesting. And then, I don't know if you can ever, like I said, if you ever really could be prepared for something like this, but people that are maybe listening, maybe they weren't even directly impacted, but want to be prepared for something just in case something, happens in the future again. In the short term, what can people do? What do you recommend people do?
I would always recommend having an emergency fund in place. So being prepared for events like this. And I know that in the short term, it might not be, we might not have time to kind of save up for that emergency fund. So things like a line of credit or a home equity line of credit are great kind of options, that they have those access to funds if they require them. And so it really kind of is a great thing to have in place, especially in times where you might not need it. It's a good idea to kind of prep that in advance so they have quick access to funds. I would also recommend having a little bit of cash on hand in case of emergencies. As we know, there can be things like service outages, Another good example would be potentially to have a Visa if you carry all MasterCards, or a MasterCard if you carry all Visas. Just because, as we've seen earlier this year, there can be service outages when it comes to those payment services as well.
Interesting. Things that we never think about, but are so, I wouldn't say easy, but stuff that people can take care of pretty quickly if as well for that. What about, you mentioned like sort of savings, which might be a little more of a long-term play. What about long-term? What are some things that people can do maybe on a long-term that they can be planning for?
For long term, I would still recommend that emergency fund, but saving up for that emergency fund. So usually what we recommend is having 3 to 6 months of expenses in case of emergency, and setting that up, working with your advisor, because there's many ways to go about setting up that emergency fund, but looking to build that up prior to kind of say your long-term savings. Having that emergency fund in place is extremely important, as we've seen. And I think that that is something that I would absolutely recommend for that long-term preparation. Another big one is working with your insurer. So I think that this will become increasingly important, especially with things like fire insurance binder, because that we're obviously in an area that is more prone to forest fire. So definitely working with your insurer maybe further in advance as you normally would with things like a home purchase, so that really kind of working through those different types of coverage, because not all coverage is made equal. So making sure that that's something that we take a closer look at as consumers there. So that would be definitely one that I recommend. And the last piece would be safety deposit boxes. I think this is one that maybe is less utilized than we've seen in the past, but always can kind of give you that peace of mind, especially in an evacuation scenario, to make sure that your items are safe in term there.
It's funny you say that, because I think it's something like my parents had, right? Safety boxes, but they're not as, I don't know, maybe as prevalent today, but they should be maybe with situations like this. That's interesting.
Absolutely.
So being prepared, would probably just go on, beyond disasters as well. So is there other areas that people, people's lives that they should be thinking about when, they need to prepare for as well?
Yeah, I would say preparedness definitely goes beyond just disasters, but I don't necessarily think that members have to prepare differently from a financial standpoint when it comes to those life events. Because I think having an emergency fund in place, having that cash reserve is something that I would recommend in kind of really any scenario. Because it really is just to have that immediate access to cash for unplanned events. So really, other examples of that could even be car repairs, home repairs, loss of income, things that are kind of immediately impacting you that are unexpected.
And I think there's probably some obvious answers here, but like, why is it important? People are listening, go, why is it important for me to plan for these sort of things? And I mean, there's some obvious answers, but maybe there's some other areas you can expand on.
Absolutely. I think during an emergency, being prepared will help us respond better and recover faster. I think one thing that we often don't think about is really the trauma event like this creates. And I think even just talking with our members over the last week and a half, 2 weeks here, you can see that it's impacted our community, and it's impacted how we are going to move forward. And so I think really being prepared for those events through those traumatic times helps lessen the financial burden, but also alleviates a lot of that stress that comes along with it. So something that we maybe don't always consider is making sure that we're prepared, because it will help us kind of get back on track.
It's interesting you say that. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday who's been impacted, didn't lose his home, but isn't back yet. And he was saying that just mentally the impact has had on him. He's a pretty strong guy, but just like mentally, he's like, I just, the kids' camps got canceled, and we're not like, he goes, we're not doing without. They're at a family's house, but still mentally. So if you can have at least a portion of this stuff taken care of, it's one less thing you need to worry about when something happens, because sometimes you just need to focus, like you said, on mental side of it, right? Which is probably the most important side when it comes down to it, right? So yeah, interesting. So some people might be listening and go, where do we start? Like, where do we start to get a plan in place? We've covered a bunch of stuff today, but what do you recommend where someone even just starts to get this in place?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the resources I would definitely recommend is actually right through the Government of BC website. There's a emergency plan that's like a fill in the blanks emergency plan.
Right.
Very, very robust. So that kind of goes through really things that you wouldn't even consider. So I really highly recommend, especially families kind of going through that to make sure that that is set up and they have a plan that's well kind of thought out. I think a big one that has come out of kind of our response to the current wildfires is where to get up-to-date information. And so those key ones: Emergency Info BC, BC Gov Fire Info, and Drive BC, to just name a few of them, because I think those are very important from the perspective of getting that real-time information, kind of knowing what emergency services that they can seek out. That's extremely important. I know one of the other big ones was access to essential services. So like we saw, phone, gas, and water, those are all ones that were impacted by the wildfires, considering what it would be like if you were to lose those services, and kind of having backups, or working through what that might look like for you or for your family if this were to occur in the future there.
Interesting. I know through the evacuation services, they were set up at rural LePage. The food bank was there every day helping feed people, give toothbrushes, whatever people need. I know that Feed the Valley is a big partner for, or a focus for you guys, but is there other initiatives that Valley First has? You mentioned that you have that initiative through the program for members. Is there other ways that you guys have helped through the or wildfires, or are you focusing on Feed the Valley? Is sort of still your the food bank is still your charity of choice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. There's actually a couple community groups that I actually wanted to highlight. The Central Okanagan Foundation's 2023 Wildfire Response Fund, right. Mamas for Mamas Fire Support Response Program in Kelowna.
Yeah.
Kelowna's Gospel Mission, as they provide supplies to evacuees. The Kelowna Professional Firefighters Charitable Society, as well as the food bank. So the Central Okanagan, the Costin Karamias Food Bank, and the Kamloops Food Bank. I'm actually very proud to say that Valley First, in direct response to the wildfires, gave $35,000 to those community groups, because it was something that I think those groups are doing some outstanding work, working with individuals who have been impacted, and their immediate response was, outstanding. So I think those are really the ones that I wanted to highlight there, because they have been having a huge impact on kind of that response that we've had for our community and members, and working with them to work through this very traumatic event.
Yeah, it's amazing how community steps up. That's one thing that I've seen for sure, and all the ones you named were like they're there every day, helping whatever way they can, which is one thing that I have to say with our community, that we're fortunate. We never want to see stuff like this happen, but when it does, like, our community comes together so quickly to help everybody, and it's awesome to see. And I know you guys are a big part of it too, so that's awesome. Anyone listening wanting to learn more, have some specific questions, what's the best way to reach out? If we've mentioned a few things today, and they might want to expand on or have some questions, what's the best way for someone to get a hold of someone from your team?
Yeah, so we have our member advice center, which is a great place to start. But I would also recommend coming and visiting us here at the branch. We'd love to have a minute to chat and potentially have you set up with one of our advisors here as well. Another good one is our Valley First website, because there's a lot of kind of information and kind of the like we've outlined some of the support that we've provided to the community. So taking a look at the website there is also one that I would recommend.
Excellent. Well, Aaron, thank you for taking some time today to talk and share some great information. I know it hasn't been an easy time for a lot of people, and a big thank you to Valley Fur for stepping up and helping out and giving some tips on how to prepare in the future, because it's things we really don't think about, right? So thank you so much for sharing some great information this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for tuning into Business Matters.
We would like to thank your sponsor, Valley First, a division of First West Credit Union and a member-owned financial cooperative serving the Okanagan, Similkameen, and Thompson regions. They offer a wide range of banking and investment services for individuals and families. Valley First also has a talented business and commercial team to provide the expertise, products, and services local businesses need to grow and thrive.